vitamin D, especially in the context of SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. So again, remember SARS-CoV-2 is the name of the virus and the COVID-19 is a disease. So we talked about vitamin C yesterday, and our conclusion was, as much as it doesn't directly affect it doesn't help prevent or combat the disease COVID-19, but it is important to keep yourself nourished with correct levels of vitamin C. So if you can eat an orange or have some orange juice, that is useful. Having said that, today we are going to, hello, Harry. So today we are going to talk about vitamin D. Again, the important thing to note about vitamin D is that vitamin D should be kept in the proper quantity in your body. Giving extra doses of vitamin D are not known to have helped. Walaikum assalam, people. Thank you very much for joining. Hello. Rachel, how are you? Thank you all. So we're talking about vitamin D and the important thing about vitamin D. So today's lecture is going to be a little interesting because we're going to talk about the normal functions of the vitamin D, and then we are going to talk about the immune modulation, or how does vitamin D help with the immune system. So let us start. My references, the book I have here is the Lippincott's Biochemistry. This is the page number 386. So I have that book here, and then I have a bunch of studies that I would show you, and I would discuss those with you. So the first thing to note is that vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. It is the most toxic vitamin of all the vitamins. So do not take this as a prescription. My recommendation is that you use vitamin D just to make yourself, have the correct supplements of the vitamin D for you, but do not overdose yourself at all. The toxicity can cause nausea, vomiting, thirst, stupor. And the most important thing is, because vitamin D works with the calcium metabolism, overdose of the vitamin D, about 100,000 international units per day for weeks or more, can cause a lots of calcium mobilized in blood, which can then result in calcium depositing in the organs, most importantly, kidneys and the blood vessels. And we do not want that. We do not want our blood vessels to have calcium depositions, because that leads to cardiovascular events. So having said that, let's talk about the vitamin D and its functions. So I'm going to talk about the vitamin D in two ways. Number one, its standard functions that we know, and that is about the calcium metabolism. And number two, we'll talk about its immune function modulation, which we would see how it can help our immune system fight with SARS-CoV-2, and is it useful in COVID-19 or not? So let's start that discussion. Before that, one more important point. Vitamin D was accidentally looked into in the people who had pneumonias. So there was an observation that people who had less vitamin D, or hypovitaminosis D, that means they had less vitamin D in their blood, they used to develop more pneumonias. So that was one observation which made people start looking into vitamin D, that why are people getting more respiratory infections if they are low on vitamin D? Is there a relationship? So we will discuss that today. Second thing was that the patients of tuberculosis, remember they used to be in the older time, they used to be asked to go and live at the higher sunny places. And there were two reasons for that, that when they would live at the higher altitude, there is more oxygen deprivation over there. And second was that, is it the oxygen? Yeah. So one for the oxygen reason, whatever that was. And the second one was that in the higher places, there is ample sunlight, which would allow the vitamin D to be converted into active form. And that would then help with the tuberculosis infection. So let's look at those functions of the vitamin D. So I'm going to start my screen, and we are going to talk about vitamin D here. So look, vitamin D, a standard function of vitamin D is to work for calcium metabolism or calcium levels, especially. So it helps maintain the calcium levels. How does it do that? So let's look at it. First of all, vitamin D is found in plants as Ergocalciferol, or it is also called vitamin D2, Ergocalciferol or vitamin D2. Now, what are the plants that are important? The most important plant or most common plant is mushrooms. Now, those mushrooms that are grown in plants, the ones that are grown without sunlight, they do not have the vitamin D2. So normally when mushrooms are grown in the plants, what they do is they then put ultraviolet rays on them to produce D2. So make sure that if you are going to eat mushrooms, these are the ones that have been either grown in light or have been exposed to ultraviolet light, so that D2 or ergocalciferol is produced in them. So that is one source. Then the animal tissue also have source of vitamin D3, which is the fatty fish, for example, salmon, herring, liver, then cod liver oil, cod liver oil, then eggs. And of course, nowadays we have a lots of fortified foods. For example, milk is fortified to have vitamin D in it. The breakfast cereals are fortified, yogurts are fortified, tofu is fortified. So there are many foods that have been fortified to have vitamin D in them. So these are the sources of vitamin D. Now what happens is all of them, the D2, which is the ergocalciferol from plants, and D3, which is the vitamin D coming from the animal tissue, these are inactive forms of vitamin D. So what happens is once we consume them, so the metabolism of vitamin D is, hello from USA, welcome from South Africa. So what happens is that once we have the vitamin D, normally, look, let's say this is our skin. In our skin, we have a cholesterol intermediate present in our skin called dihydrocholesterol. So we have in our skin 7-dihydrocholesterol, which is converted to cholecalciferol or D3 by ultraviolet rays. So this is why it is important for us to go out in sunlight so that inactive vitamin D can start becoming active, or vitamin D production can start from 7-dihydrocholesterol. Now, this is also then important that folks who are like my skin color or the people who have melanin in their skin, melanin can actually cause absorption of ultraviolet rays and reduce the exposure of the person to the ultraviolet rays or the 7-dihydrocholesterol to make more D3. So folks who have melanin in their skin, they need to be out in sun for longer period of time. Now, why is this more important at this time? Just like in the quarantine, Kofi Asant said that. So look, if we are sitting indoors or if we are living in areas where there is less sunlight, then we are going to become depleted of vitamin D or active form of vitamin D. And this is something that I want you to take away. We have to have the correct levels of vitamin D in our body to be able to combat infections and have the correct immune system responses. What they say is that the vitamin D itself does not prevent or kill a virus or a bacteria, but it is important for the correct function of the immune system. And I would show you today how that happens. So for that, it is important that the levels are correct. If you said to me that, hey, I can manage levels, if you said that, hey, I can manage levels above the normal, then that is of no use. Although there are studies that are trying to see that vitamin D, see the patients in ICU, especially respiratory infection patients in ICU are given vitamin D by injections. So that is a different kind of treatment. This is not for us at home. For us at home, this is important that if, for example, now in quarantine, we are sitting at home, we need to go out to get sunlight. So sunlight is, oh, wow. Ty from Bermuda. Wow, welcome. Welcome, Ty. So going back to the discussion, so the vitamin D, let me share my, Rabia Sohail, welcome. Okay, so let me share my screen here. So once again, as the D3 is formed, again, remember D3 is inactive form. This is called cholecalciferol, or cholecalciferol, whichever way you want to call it. Now this D3 needs to go to liver. It goes into the liver where a hydroxylase, we call it 25-hydroxylase enzyme. What is that enzyme? 25-hydroxylase enzyme would take this D3 and convert it into 25, of course that is an enzyme name, hydroxyl D3. So it hydroxylases, here B from India, welcome. It hydroxylates the D3 and attaches that hydroxyl group at 25 position. So this is the first hydroxylation, and this compound, which is now 25 vitamin D, is still not active. This compound will now go to, let me put that here, this will now go to kidneys. This compound will now go to kidneys, and in there is another enzyme called 25, long name, 25-cholecalciferol 1-hydroxylase. What that means is this enzyme's name, it says it takes the 25-cholecalciferol, which is this guy, and it puts one more hydroxyl group at the position number 1. So we now end up with, in the kidney, we end up with 1,25. Of course, now there are 2 hydroxylations, so dihydroxyl D3. So I'm going to write it in a different color. 1,25 di, because there are 2 hydroxylations, dihydroxyl D3. This compound is the active vitamin 3, vitamin D. So now if you look at it, we need to be in the sunlight so we can get this compound to be converted to D3. We need ultraviolet rays. Once we have them, then the D3 has to go to the liver where it would get converted to 25 hydroxyl D3. And then that compound would go to kidney where it would get converted, it would be hydroxylated once more to become 1,25 dihydroxycholecalciferol. This is the active D3, vitamin D3. Now also remember, just for our information, this production of vitamin D3 is affected by many things. For example, if we have less calcium in our body, then our parathyroid hormone level will go up. If we have less calcium, that parathyroid hormone would act on kidney to ask it to make more vitamin D3. If the calcium level is normal or calcium level is more, then parathyroid hormone level is go down so that we do not make a lot of vitamin D. So this is one mechanism. Then if we have less PO4 or phosphate, if the phosphate level is less, that also causes the increase in production of vitamin D in kidney, or conversion to vitamin D in kidney, or activation of vitamin D in kidney. So that is two. Thirdly, when active vitamin D is produced, it also feeds back the production, and if the amount is more than normal, it would try to reduce further activation. So what are the controls for vitamin D production? Low phosphate levels in the body, in the blood, low calcium levels. If calcium levels are low, they activate the vitamin D indirectly by first producing more parathyroid hormones, which in turn cause the kidney to produce more vitamin. If we have less phosphate, that would directly work on the kidney to produce more vitamin D3. And if we have vitamin 3 levels higher, then they themselves, or vitamin D level higher, they themselves would act on kidney as well. Good. Now, let us see when vitamin D is produced, what is the function of the vitamin D? It works on, number one, kidney. It works on kidney, and what it does is it increases the reabsorption of calcium, or simply it also reduces the excretion of calcium. So it reduces the renal clearance of calcium. That is one. Secondly, it goes into the intestinal cells, GIT cells. So let's say these are GIT cells. Inside the cell, when vitamin D enters, so let's say this is the vitamin D. When vitamin D enters the cell, it binds to its receptor there. Now this is very, very important. We call it vitamin D receptor. Please keep this receptor in your mind, because we are going to talk about immune cells and the receptor in there and what is the function there. So it combines with the vitamin D receptors in the cytosol or the cytoplasm. Then this complex goes into the nucleus of the cell, where it binds with the gene, various genes that are for vitamin D. So let's say this complex is now in here and it has bound there. This causes the gene expression for a protein. So of course there will be a messenger RNA made. Messenger RNA would then result in protein formation. This is the calcium binding protein. Calcium binding protein. This protein will be formed. It would go here on this side of the GIT where the calcium is present. So let's say this is the lumen of the GIT. It would go there, it would bind with calcium and bring the calcium to the blood side or the tissue side. So calcium absorption in the GIT will increase when vitamin D is present. So now there are two main functions. Excretion of calcium by kidney, or clearance of calcium, is reduced. Absorption of calcium is increased. Then vitamin D goes into bones. So let's say this is a bone. Guess what bone is this? It goes into bones. And what does it do? Over there, vitamin D causes increased osteoclast activity. Remember, there are osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Osteoblasts are the one that cause deposition of calcium. Very good, Hassan. Yes. And osteoclasts are the one that break down the bone structure. So osteoclast activity is increased. That results in calcium mobilization. Bones act as a store for calcium. So calcium is mobilized. Thank you very much. So there is a comment that, hey, I'm very happy to see you here online. Thank you very much. All right. So uh, three ways that vitamin D would help with the calcium metabolism or calcium levels and phosphate levels. And that is number one, acting on kidney. Number two, acting on GIT. Number three, acting on bone. Is this clear? This is the standard action of vitamin D. So nothing special in here. I think you all know this. Vitamin D helps with the calcium and phosphate levels. Good. Now we're going to go into the detail of immune system. So any issues so far? So I'm assuming that there are no issues so far. So I'm going to move towards the fun part of the discussion, and that is, how does vitamin D help with immune system strength, and can it help reduce pulmonary infections? Can it help with COVID-19? So let's start that. So the first thing, sorry, I accidentally turned my camera off and now I accidentally turned it on. So let's go here to my board and back here. So now we're going to talk about vitamin D and immune system. This is the important thing. The studies that I have used for this discussion are the following. So if you see here, there is one study here that says the immunological implications of the new vitamin D metabolism. That is one. I have also used another study that is referred in this article by New Scientist. Vitamin D supplements may prevent millions of winter infection. Then there is a discussion of some proteins I will be talking about, and these are cathalicidins, and we will talk about them. Then we are also going to talk about beta defensins, so keep that in mind. And then here is another study, which is vitamin D and the immune system, and we are going to look at that study as well. So again, the discussion that you are going to hear is going to be from these studies. If I make an error, that is mine, but the studies, if you read them, the studies have a lot of interesting information there. So things to note. First of all, SARS-CoV-2 is an enveloped virus, correct? It's a coronavirus. Coronaviruses are enveloped viruses. Good. This is important to keep in mind. This is important to keep in mind because enveloped viruses can be affected by the proteins that vitamin D activates. This is very, very important. So please keep this in your mind. If I ask you what one thing to keep in mind, you should say enveloped virus, coronavirus. Because why? The membrane of the virus is a target of the proteins that vitamin D activates. So if we forget that the virus has a membrane, then we cannot connect those dots. So would you promise me that you'll keep this in your mind, that coronavirus is an enveloped virus? Keep that in mind. Now let's start how it works. Look, what happens is when we give vitamin D, so let's say this is a macrophage. We are talking about the innate arm, remember, immune system has two arms, innate and acquired. So innate arm of the immune system is what we're talking about. We are talking about a macrophage. When a macrophage connects with a pathogen, so let's say this is a pathogen, he's a horrible, looks very happy. Let's make him angry. This is the angry pathogen. Okay, it is slightly angry pathogen now, right? So this pathogen, it says, I'm gonna damage you. So this is a coronavirus. These pathogens are connected on receptors which are PAMPs, PAMP, or TLRs, toll-like receptors. These are receptors on macrophages that help them connect with pathogen and eat them up. Good. So this, people are laughing now. I had to make sure that the pathogen is not a happy pathogen. We should make the macrophage a little happy guy. So macrophage is happy. Pathogen is angry guy. So the macrophage has receptors which are PAMPs and TLRs. When these receptors become activated, then what happens is, of course, these guys, the pathogen is internalized, but at the same time, vitamin D receptors are activated. Imagine if this thing, the PAMP receptor and TLR, are like a doorbell. They are like a doorbell. When a pathogen connects with them, not only they start a lot of other processes to eat that pathogen and kill this, but they also start producing vitamin D receptors. Vitamin D receptors, guys. Now, why do we need to do that? Because vitamin D is necessary now to do certain immune help functions. Secondly, vitamin D, just like in the kidneys, vitamin D can be activated. Do you know that vitamin D can be picked up in the inactive form? So I'm going to say 25 hydroxylated vitamin D3. This is an inactive form. Remember, it has to become 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3 to become active. This inactive form can now be picked up and converted to active form, 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3. This is really, really important. The cells, immune cells, T cell, B cell, macrophage, monocyte, and many dendritic cells, they have their own enzymes to convert vitamin D into active form and use it. Good. So this is another important point now. Keep this in mind. First point was that coronavirus is membranous. Second point is that the immune cells have the ability to activate vitamin D within them without the need for kidney to do it. They have their own enzymes to activate the vitamin D. Okay, so now let's say that vitamin D is activated. What are these cells going to do with that? When the vitamin D is activated, it helps them produce proteins called cathelicidins. Cathelicidin, my handwriting is so broken. Cathelicidin and beta defensins. These are two important proteins that are generated. And not just by the macrophages, these can be generated by other immune cells as well. Important thing for us to know is that macrophage, when it, or an immune cell, when it picks up the pathogen, it activates its vitamin D receptors, plus it can convert vitamin D to active form. Then that vitamin D helps produce cathelicidins and beta defensins. And one more thing, it also helps them produce nuclear factor kappa for beta B active B cells. Nuclear factor kappa light chain for active B cell, NFK beta. So these are the three important things that are produced. We are now going to see how are these things going to help. And remember this, NFK beta production needs vitamin D. Beta defensin, they need NFK beta. And NFK beta need vitamin D. Similarly, cathelicidin production needs vitamin D. If we do not have vitamin D, these things are not going to be produced in the correct amounts. That means our immune system is not going to work correctly. So let me show you how these proteins then help kill the pathogen. Now, Remember, I had asked you to keep in mind that coronavirus is membranous. Let's see how this works. I'm going to start with beta defensins. So here is what happens. Beta defensins, when they are released, so let's say this is I'm going to try to make this pathogen now angry one. So here is the pathogen. This is coronavirus. It has those weird things on it. S proteins, right? Spikes. And it is a really angry virus at this time, right? He's saying, I'm going to really do something bad to you guys. So we don't like it. Coronavirus. So the first thing that beta defensins do is that they can enter beta defensin, these protein can enter the cell membrane. And this is why it is interesting that the beta defensins can help with coronavirus. It is an enveloped virus. It has a membrane. If we had bacteria, they have outer shells as well and membranes on them too. And not all viruses have membranes. There are naked viruses that do not have envelopes, and defensins cannot do anything with them. Here, we are lucky that coronavirus has a membrane. Because of this, defensins can actually enter the membrane, create holes in that membrane, and then go in the cell. In that process, the hole that they create causes, of course, the membrane becomes disrupted, and the material from inside can be leaked out. Secondly, when the membrane is damaged, the cell can die. This is not a cell, sorry, the virus can die when the membrane becomes damaged. So this is one way that defensins will help kill the virus, and defensins production needs nuclear factor K beta, and for that we need vitamin D. So now imagine if I have vitamin D deficiency and I am attacked by a virus, let's say coronavirus, can I reasonably, correctly defend myself against it, my immune system? No. Why? Because I will not be able to produce correct amount of nuclear factor K beta, which will then allow a lesser amount of beta defensins, which would then allow a lesser response to coronavirus killing. Then let's look at cathelicidins. These guys, what do? They are such fun things. What they do is the following. Number one, they cause chemotaxis. Chemotaxis mean immune system's cells to call them to the area of the infection. So cathelicidins need vitamin D to become active. Vitamin D, when present in the macrophages or the immune cells, would allow them to produce cathelicidins. Cathelicidins in turn would cause chemotaxis. That would increase the immune response, number one. Number two, it increases macrophages activity for phagocytosis. What is phagocytosis? A macrophage eating up the pathogens and killing them. So we need cathelicidins that would help activate the macrophages to kill more. Then cathelicidin increase vascular permeability. So there is more blood moving and coming into the area of infection to help combat and provide nutrition and oxygen and take the waste products away. Cathelicidins also help with activation of T cells and B cells by making them proliferate. So it helps them proliferate and activate. So isn't this an interesting thing that vitamin D is necessary in normal quantities? So please guys, it doesn't mean abnormal quantities. Normal quantities of vitamin D is necessary for the immune cells to do their function. Does this make sense? So this is one way that the vitamin D would help. What is that one way? That when a pathogen comes in, at that time, the receptors on the cell, these would also activate the vitamin D receptors, plus it would also activate the vitamin D. It would actually create vitamin D or activate it. Then that vitamin D would help produce NFK beta. That would also help produce beta defensins. It would also help produce cathalicidins, which all of them in turn will help amplify the immune system. So think about it for a second. Isn't this going to help against coronavirus, at least in normal quantities, to help reduce or help our immune system work better? It will. Would it help with the other infections? Yes. Other viruses? Yes. So it is going to help our immune system in its normal function. I want to now go to another important effect on the immune system by this vitamin. So tell me this, is this function clear? That vitamin D is necessary to help produce cathalicidins and beta defensins and NFK beta. Is this clear? And that in turn amplifies immune system responses. Good? So far good? I'm going to go to the next step for the second way vitamin D would help immune system. So if we are good so far, we're going to move forward. I'm going to assume we are good. So there is a good question. Jackson says that, sir, won't there be an exudative changes due to vascular permeability by cathalicidins? So simple answer that this is not an over activation of the immune system. This is a normal activity. So let's now, there are so many other regulatory mechanisms that would help keep things in balance. Okay, now the next thing. This is even more fun, guys. This is so much fun. So look, we have done this at least in my immune system lectures many times, that immune system has an innate arm and an acquired arm, correct? Innate arm, normally monocyte, macrophage, natural killer cells, those kind of cells, correct? Now let's say we make a macrophage. We talked about macrophage above, so I am comfortable that I've already discussed it. I want to now talk about acquired arm. Acquired arm has B cells and T cells, correct? The difference between them is that T cells are like soldiers. They are going to fight with the enemy in the field. And T cells, and B cells are the guys who produce chemical substances that are released in the blood, and these chemical substances are going to go and kill the pathogen. So I would say that B cell is like bio warfare, and T cell is more soldiers fighting, in the fields. Now, when a pathogen, focus here on the macrophage. When a pathogen, this same angry guy, he doesn't look angry, he looks sad. How do I make him angry? So imagine he is angry. He's not very angry, but imagine he is angry. So this is an angry pathogen who comes in and goes into the macrophage. Macrophage, we know that it is going to break it down into smaller pieces, and then it is going to show them on MHC2. So let's say this is a piece of pathogen. So this is the antigen. A piece of pathogen is called an antigen, and it is shown on MHC2. Right? This is why macrophages are called antigen presenting cell. The other antigen presenting cell is dendritic cell and B cell. Now here is standing a rather naive. Does his expression tell you that he's naive? Like he's like, huh? What is my role in life? Naive T cell. It is also called T helper 0 cell. It is a 0 cell because it doesn't know what it is going to do yet. The T helper cell connects through the T cell receptor with this antigen presenting cell, and then there are co-stimulations and stuff like that. There is multiple ways to engage, but once that engagement occurs, this T helper cell, if we drop interleukin 12 on it, if we put interleukin 12 on the T helper cell, then what it does is it would cause T helper 1 cell to become active. Keep this in mind. This is very, very important. So the correct dose of vitamin D3 is about how many international units per day? I think it is 5 milligram of calciferol or 100 international units, if I am correct. Let me just very quickly look that up for you. Yeah, 200 international units or 5 milligram. Although they say that the bone protective dose for vitamin D3 or vitamin is above 800 international units. So back here, we have this T cell. When it is connecting with the macrophage, if we put IL-12 on it, interleukin 12 on it, then it would create T helper 1 activity. When T helper 1 becomes active, now please guys pay attention here. This is where vitamin D is going to be important. T helper 1, when that becomes active, it produces interferon gamma. That is sent back to macrophage. Macrophage, when it becomes active with interferon gamma, and it releases a lot of IL-1, IL-6, and other cytokines. Good. If the TL receptor, this naive cell, if we put IL-4 on him, then he activates T helper 2 cells, which in turn activate by IL-4 and IL-5, it activates the B cells. So this diagram is the holy grail of immune activation. And what I want to show you here is this. Look, vitamin D, when present, causes the system to move in this direction. It causes the immune system to move towards T helper 2 cell direction. Why? Because T helper 2 cell direction is sort of anti-inflammatory. I'll give you an example and connect it to COVID-19. Look, in the COVID-19 serious cases, in the patients on the ventilator, we give them IL-6 inhibitors, right? Look, where is the IL-6 coming from? It is coming from one of the cells is macrophages. And look who is activating the macrophage, T helper 1, by sending interferon gamma. Correct? So now imagine when vitamin D is present and it moves the balance towards T helper 2 cell, that causes reduction. That causes reduction in interferon gamma. It causes reduction in interleukin 6. It causes reduction in interleukin 1. And it also causes reduction in interleukin 8 and other interleukins that are pro-inflammatory. So this is something really, really interesting. Guys, look at this picture once again. Presence of vitamin D helps move towards T helper 2 cells, which are more anti-inflammatory than pro-inflammatory. And think about COVID-19 for a second. In the COVID-19 world, what is happening? Patients who are becoming seriously ill, they have cytokine storms going. They have severe activation of their inflammatory response. That inflammatory response causes ARDS, then septic shock, then death. So vitamin D's presence regulates the inflammatory system downwards. So they say that when they started doing research on vitamin D, the reason for research was that people who are low on vitamin D develop more respiratory infections, and they were curious why. So it turned out that vitamin D's immune regulatory system or regulatory system was dysregulated in the people with less vitamin D. So correct amount of vitamin D allows the correct function of the immune system so that it can properly help with the pathogen, and especially not go in the cytokine storms like IL-6 causes. And final note, I'm not going to go back to my board now. The final note is they also feel that when vitamin D is present, it helps the epithelial cells, that is our respiratory system cells. It helps them make their membranes more stable, make them less permeable to water and other substances. So it is not easy for the pathogen to enter the cell. So there are 3 defense mechanisms to which vitamin D helps. Again, I'll say, does it prevent COVID-19? No. Does it kill SARS-CoV-2? No. But it allows our system to work correctly if the correct amount of vitamin D is present. So what are the 3 important things? Number 1, it stabilizes the cell membranes, so they are difficult to be infected. Number 2, it causes the innate arm of the immune system to become very active and produce cathelicidins, beta defensins, and NFK beta, which in turn helps them kill the pathogen. Then it causes the acquired arm of the system, immune system, to move more towards the less inflammatory arm instead of pro-inflammatory system. So this is what vitamin D does. Now, my conclusion, just like yesterday I said, should you take supplements? All the articles say that taking supplements is still not clear because vitamin D needs to be activated. So imagine if I take food or I take supplement and I sit without the sunlight, vitamin D is not going to be. Make sure that you also take sunlight. Otherwise, they say supplements are useless. So my opinion will be take supplements, make sure that your vitamin D levels are correct. If your levels may not be correct because let's say you have not been going out in sun, or you live in an area where there is not enough sunlight, or there is pregnancy, in such cases, go to your doctor, get your vitamin levels checked, and get the prescription for the right vitamin dose. But keep your vitamin D up as well. Keep taking the supplements, go out in the sun, and make sure that you have vitamin D provided in your body. This is my opinion. Some of the articles disagree with that. They say that vitamin D supplements are not needed. Some of the articles say they are needed. I think vitamin D levels are needed for the normal function, and make sure that you have correct vitamin D levels, especially nowadays. So the question is that how long under the sun? So I think that there is a chart somewhere that tells you that for half an hour, you will make this much of the vitamin. So please Google it and find it. Half an hour daily, 1 hour daily is sufficient, but go out in sun. And don't go out like I'm wearing these clothes and only my face and hands are showing. Go out with a little bit of your body showing so that you can make the vitamin D. So this is it for today, guys. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your time. What do you think we should talk about tomorrow? I was thinking about convalescent plasma or the antibody treatment. And the other question I was thinking was the testing, the immunoglobulin tests. So should we talk about test tomorrow, or should we talk about convalescent plasma and the cure? We can talk about the iodine as well. Sunscreen or no sunscreen. Of course, sunscreen tries to block the ultraviolet rays, but take the sunscreen at least for your face. Okay, so there are 3 possibilities: vaccination to COVID-19 or SARS-CoV, or testing of SARS-CoV, or treatment of SARS-CoV. What do you think? Plasma Okay. So more votes are on the plasma side. So we are going to talk about immunoglobulin therapy for uh, for these COVID-19 tomorrow, and what are the possibilities, what are the studies, what has been done. So thank you very much, guys. Please do me a favor, share it with your friends. That is how you can help me, because I see so much of incorrect information out there. I try to, as you can see, with proper references, I bring you information, and let's see if we can provide it to more people by sharing it. Thank you very much. Have a good day.